Alrighty, guys. Welcome to another episode of Coach's Corner. I am Bethany Westbrook. I'm going to be the host for today. And on our schedule, we got Matt Hands presenting today on resistance training. So our topic of the day is resistance training and why that isn't just for meatheads. Going to call on some of the coaches to kind of add in some of their expertise. That should be something that we're all pretty familiar with. So look on you guys to add in some of your, personal experiences and what you know. But before we get started, we're going to do some rapid fire questions. So Matt, are you ready?
I'm ready to go.
All righty. Try to make them quick. I think I got 10 here. So,
Okay.
All right. Where were you born?
Louisville.
What's your favorite movie?
Pulp Fiction.
Sweet or savory?
Savory.
Proudest accomplishment?
Ooh. I'll say finishing grad school.
Okay. Basketball or football?
Football.
Favorite place to eat in Louisville?
I don't eat out too much, but I really like Bonnie and Clyde's.
Okay.
It's a joint.
All righty. Beach or mountains?
Depends on depends on the season.
Okay.
But initially, I'll go mountains.
All righty. Sunset or sunrise?
Sunset.
Last book you read?
$1 Trillion Coach.
All righty. Last one. Best Halloween costume you were made?
We already talked about this earlier. Some of the coaches might know this, but I don't put a lot of effort into the Halloween costumes. I'm pretty procrastination when it comes to that. But I was Negan from The Walking Dead one year. It worked out pretty well.
Nice. Fun stuff. All righty. So we'll go ahead and get rolling now with our talk for today. So we're talking about resistance training and kind of how that applies to people that might be listening, applies to their daily life and how to incorporate that. So starting off, what is resistance training?
Yeah, when many people ask that question, it seems, it kind of comes across as something that seems so simple, but it can be kind of a loaded question. When you think of resistance training, you probably think of the stigma around what it sounds like, and it's usually something along the lines of bodybuilders or powerlifting, strongman, Olympic weightlifting. There's a bunch of different names for it. Maybe even something, when you think of resistance training, it's something that athletes just do. But in reality, a traditional definition of what resistance training is anything that really involves the performance of physical exercises which are designed to improve strength. That's kind of the all-encompassing definition for that. However, I like to say we live in the gray. Many have probably heard that a number of times. The health and wellness, there's never really black and white or hard lines in the sand, so to speak. So I like to give a little bit of a nuanced definition, and that's just any type of movement against a resistance. So you can think of, getting a little ahead of myself here, but you can think of resistance, and the possibilities are probably endless when you think of something that adds resistance to a movement or whatever that may be. So
yeah, I think that's a huge part of the conversation today, and kind of like what I think of when I think of the resistance training, kind of that nuanced aspect to it that we talked about earlier. And like how that can look different for so many different people. There's not like a one size that fits all for
Right.
each individual. It can, if you're not passionate about using a barbell, like that's okay. You can find something else that'll suit you just fine. Like depending on what your goals are, like there's probably going to be something else out there that you can, have fun with. So Tell me a little bit more about that nuanced definition and like what does that entail and how does that look?
Right. So when we think of resistance training, we tend to think of improving strength. Like that's kind of the first thought when you think of something that involves resistance training. So like when you think of strength, like what you kind of have to look at what is strength? Like what does that look like? From a definition standpoint, you could say it's as simple as increasing the maximum amount of force capabilities of your muscle tissue. That's the very sciencey term for what is strength. But in reality, that's just, can I do a little bit more than I did yesterday? It could be as simple as that. So when you think of like the nuanced definition of resistance training and or improving strength, they kind of go hand in hand. But I think we have to kind of circle back and say, what does strength look like? And strength, like you had just mentioned, strength doesn't always look the same to everyone. Strength could be a numbers only game where we're looking at, how much weight we can move as someone in like powerlifting, where they simply are trying to squat, bench, and deadlift as much possible weight as possible. But then, you can look at it as someone else, just a general gym goer and say, well, what is strength? Well, strength could be, I can get up out of my chair without feeling super strenuous activity. It's an easier task than it was prior. It could be something as simple as that.
Yeah. When I think of like a little bit more nuanced definition for general pop, I think of just being able to move well, with good quality, no pain or little pain. So like you said, just kind of getting up and down off the floor, walking, just having that strength to avoid injuries and, just be able to move well and have a good quality of life is kind of what I think of. Any other coaches kind of have any thoughts on that?
I have tons of thoughts on it, which you all knew I would. But like what you said, Beth, I think that's something that's overlooked in the industry a ton, is like, we always talk about where are you at in your journey and what is your goal? Like, it's what you said, if you don't want to lift a barbell, don't lift it. But if you love kettlebells, you can gain strength that way. But also, like, a lot of people, when they think of fitness, or they are intimidated by resistance training, or they think what our topic says, resistance training is just not for meatheads. It's like you said, individuals may be getting older and they have young grandchildren, and they're noticing that they cannot get up and down off the floor with ease anymore. So honestly, what they need is strength. They need more strength. Like, bottom line is, like, they don't need more conditioning. They need to learn to move again. And that comes with strength in any way you look at it. So I feel like a great test to do. And this is like, it's difficult, but it may be really eye-opening for individuals, is like, if you're at your desk chair, I'm standing right now, so you can't see me, but if you're sitting on your desk chair and you're sitting down, can you sit down and with one leg, take one leg off, press into the ground, and stand up on one leg? That's going to be something that so many people struggle with. And that's essentially an understanding of balance and understanding of glute strength. It's something that like is very easy to like, those pieces are strength too. So whether you're looking to gain muscle or change body composition or whatever you're looking to try to do, you need that basic strength to continue to move properly.
Yeah. Sure.
That's my tidbit for the day.
It's a great tidbit.
Well, you transitioned us perfectly, and kind of the next part is, why is resistance training important? Why should we do it? So Dana kind of touched on a little bit of it, but what else do you have, Matt, that kind of some reasons for why to do it?
I have a ton of reasons why it's important. And it's not just important for meatheads too. So when we think of, the reason, when we look at resistance training, sometimes we get caught up in this, this bigger, faster, stronger or kind of cycle, like where this is resistance training is just meant to get bigger, faster, stronger, to do X, Y, and Z. But it's not simply that. There's so many benefits that come from just the act of resistance training. Not so much the result of it, but also just the act of doing resistance training. One of the biggest ones that I think we can all relate to, especially as myself included. I'm getting older. I'm not the same athlete / person that I used to be 10 years ago when I would work out like a crazy person. But anti-aging, I think it's a simple way to say, what we can benefit from is we can reduce the effects of aging. I'll go off on a little bit of a tangent here, and when we look at the way we've always been taught about aging, we say that all these effects of aging are that's what it's because. It's just because we're getting older. We can't move as fast. We can't, run as far. I can't have as much balance as I had before. I'm losing coordination. My kind of radical thought is that we've just kind of said that this was a part of aging, when really it's just a lack of doing. We just haven't done it anymore. We don't move our bodies quite like we used to. It's, if you don't use it, you lose it kind of method, your thought process behind that. So always really come back to anti-aging, because what resistance training really does is it's going to that external load, regardless of what that's coming from, barbell, kettlebell, sleds, body weight, whatever it may be, what that external load is going to do is it's going to help attenuate, that muscle mass. And then, muscle mass decreases as we age. The bone density decreases as we age. These two big things that happen with aging, we can really reduce the effects of that through resistance training.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I know, again, we were talking earlier kind of about, I think some people don't realize just how critical it is to be preventing injuries early on. I know you said one of the benefits is anti-fragility. And so like people don't realize, if you sprain your ankle, you were saying like person A, person B, if you sprain your ankle, person A is an active individual that's doing strength training. They're probably going to be able to recover pretty quickly, or they're going to take like a day of, light movement, and then they're going to get back to pretty much normal activity. Person B is going to take a little bit more time off. Their ankle's going to bother them for a while. They might not run as much as they used to. They might not walk as much as they used to. A year down the line, they might put on 30 pounds, and so it's like, you don't realize how much an injury is actually going to affect your health, and how important it is to be preventing those injuries. And, who knows what might happen. And so, yeah, just, it's good for your health to be staying strong and preventing those injuries. So that was a huge takeaway for me.
Exactly. So it's like I said, it's a vicious cycle of, that whole thing you just said about anti-fragility. And that's one of the next big one, the anti-aging, and the kind of thought of anti-fragility is, it kind of goes one and the same. We're using resistance training as a means to an end, and that's to, keep us as healthy and like I like to say, resilient and robust as possible to whatever stimulus and life endeavors that kind of creates. And it's like you said, it's, if the sedentary person who rolls their ankle doing whatever they were doing, and like you said, it kind of just vicious cycles down the road. 2-3 years later, they're like, oh man, where did it go? And it's as simple as 2 days a week of some sort of resistance training that can help it, really reduce the risk of that kind of unfolding.
Mm-hmm.
It seems so simple when we talk about it now, but it is, life happens, and There's a bunch of different things. We're being pulled in a number of directions. So, but it's just one of those things that you got to kind of think back and look at the long term and say, hey, like, what are some ways that I can help, make myself healthy and for the long term. And that's it. My simple answer is resistance training. It's, like I said, it's anti-aging, you got anti-fragility in there. Not only are those two important, but you're also going to get a lot of hormonal benefits from it, whether that's male and female, especially in the, male population, we tend to see our testosterone numbers as unfortunate and macho as this kind of sounds, but, your testosterone decreases as you age. I mean, that's a known fact. It does decrease, but what stimulates testosterone or free testosterone in the body is resistance training. So it can be as simple as that. And the effects beyond like strength and muscle size and all that good stuff with testosterone, it's vitality, for men. It's as simple as that. You may notice you're losing hair, your energy levels are bad. You've gained a little bit of extra weight that you normally didn't have. And these are all side effects of, your testosterone just decreasing. And a simple way to help reduce that is to do some strenuous exercise, especially with moving an external load. That's what helps stimulate that process.
Yeah. So opening it up to the coaches, why do you guys strength train? Are there things that you notice, after strength training for a couple weeks or months that you notice about your body that you feel different and you like? I think the body composition usually is something that people notice pretty, soon, or it's something that's a little bit more kind of well known as a side effect. But anything else that you guys kind of notice or see?
For me, I'm just happier in general. Like I'm gonna take a quote from Legally Blonde, like people that exercise are happy and happy people don't kill people. So I'm just gonna say in general, it helps with all aspects of my life and my personal life and my professional life. Like it helps with my moods and stimulates, like it helps with anxiety, it helps with stress. For me, it's a really big stress relief. Like that's where I go to. It is my time, it is my moment, and it's where I need to release a lot of stress, but then I get back a lot of energy, and there's some chemical dopamines dropping off there too. So it's the best of both worlds for me. So that's why I continue to do it. Not every day do I want to, but if I simply make it there, when I leave, I feel much better.
Mm-hmm.
I can jump in. I have some like aches and pains and stuff like that from like sports back in the day. And for me, resistance training is also something to help me kind of manage just being able to be functional and move. And in turn does help my mood and my stress and things of that nature and allow me to do things I really like to do. So without it, I noticed a pretty stark increase to discomfort or my lack of mobility and things of that nature.
Anyone else?
I feel like it overall just like helps with other things too. So like I do a lot of running, but doing that resistance training and strength training to kind of counterbalance that, I feel like helps that cardio even be stronger and helps push through those times where I'd be more fatigued and things like that. So I feel like it just kind of overall helps create a more well-rounded workout routine, definitely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Super important for runners.
Yeah, I would agree. Even with the running, you can look at it as, like you had mentioned, the body comp kind of the thought process of body comp. And, once again, kind of rolling back to some of the stigmas that are wrapped around resistance training is it going to make me bulky? Especially in the female population, everyone thinks if I start lifting weights or moving heavier loads, I'm going to get big and bulky. And that's not always the case. And, that's not the goal. You don't have to train for that. I think if you took a look at, what bodybuilders actually do versus what it looks like they do, you would notice they're really not moving that much of a heavy load. A lot of times it's very specific movements for, repeated for aesthetic gains. But that's not a bad thing either, on the other side, to want to increase some muscle tissue. There's a lot of health benefits related to increasing muscle size. Obviously, if we come back, we can say that, with the anti-aging, the anti-fragility approach, having a little more muscle mass on my body is gonna reduce my risk of injury if I have a little bit, stronger, healthier muscle tissue around my knee. I'm gonna protect my knee from some weird stimulus or movement, or if you're walking the dog on the leash and it sees a squirrel and it takes off and you get a little off balance and it takes you out. You're gonna, you have a little more strength around that knee. You're gonna be a little better off to reduce the injury from that exact task. But and then if you also look at it from a food consumption side, the more muscle mass on my body, the more caloric needs I'm gonna have for that. Meaning, every year as I'm getting a little older, if I reduce my muscle tissue every year. If I eat the same amount of calories every year for 5 years, but my muscle tissue decreases, I'll end up gaining fat because now I don't have as much of what you could call caloric patritioning to muscle tissue. So there's, you can look at it 100 different ways, but as you kind of circle back to different things, like having some more muscle tissue it's not a bad thing. You don't have to get bulky. Gaining 2 or 3 pounds of muscle isn't going to be too. You're going to notice it, but it's not going to be. You're not going to turn into Hulk Hogan back in the day from 2 days a week in the gym, 2 or 3 days a week in the gym. But I'm getting a little off topic, but just wanted to kind of touch on the benefits of, maybe the negative, kind of reduce that negative stimulus that comes with getting bulky.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think there's a lot of misconception, especially for women, like you said, with strength training. And there's so many women that don't realize, a lot of the times, not always, but a lot of the times, the reason their metabolism slows down so much once they get to, 35 or 40 is because they start to lose muscle mass a little bit quicker. And then it gets even, faster, the loss of muscle mass as they age. And you just don't realize that. It's not something that, people are always taught. And so, maintaining muscle mass, building muscle mass is going to help to just keep you looking the way you want to look, feeling the way you want to feel. So super important. Yeah. All right. So what are some ways that you like to resistance train, Matt?
Had you asked me this question, 5 years ago, I'd probably have a completely different answer. But I think it's changed a lot. Like, as being an ex-athlete, I always used to resistance train the way I knew. And that the way I knew was the way I was taught as an athlete. And, that looked a certain way. It was mostly with a barbell and mostly in a squat rack, things like that. But as I've gotten older, things change, priorities change a little bit. I think I've grown to realize, like we had talked about earlier, there's so many different ways to load the human body. I mean, you could push and pull a sled. We can throw some kettlebells around, sandbags. There's so many different tools to use. And for me, it's, what I like to do personally now is, I like to spend time doing other things than just spending 2 hours in the gym, as I was in the past. Now I like to get in 45 minutes, mix it up a little bit. I like to use sandbags, kettlebells, every now and then maybe a barbell. But, it's for me, it's just shaking things up a little bit and using some different new, like maybe some novel ways to stimulate my body for what I want.
Okay. Here's a fun question. Is there anything that you're like really interested in that you don't know much about or that you haven't tried? I think of like the Onnit maces, or I don't know, just something weird that you like think you looks pretty interesting, but you just haven't tried it.
Yeah, there's it's called flywheel training.
Okay.
And I don't know a ton about it, but essentially it's a pulley system that as you work through the movement, so if it's say it's like a squat, it'll have like a belt attachment that goes around your body, goes down to a box.
Yeah.
And as you come up and it wraps around that flywheel, it gets a little harder as you go.
Okay.
It's easier at the bottom, a little harder at the top, and I've been a little curious about those lately. Kind of hard to find, not very available to a lot of populations, but that's something that I've been pretty interested in lately.
Okay, cool. I wasn't familiar with the name, but I know what you're talking about now. So any other coaches, what do you guys like to do? And is there anything that you guys are interested in that you haven't tried? Let's go with Mark. I feel like you're going to have an interesting answer.
Me is pretty much anything. If the body can move that way, we do it. Basically, single leg, unilateral, bilateral, sleds, kettlebells, suspension trainers. What? If it's in the gym, we're gonna use it. What else do we do? Power wheels, yeah, sandbags, pretty much all that stuff. Basically, if you train with me, if I train by myself, if we hit the gym, we're gonna hit. You'll have a kettlebell out, a jump box. The sled is guaranteed 100%. If you check my Instagram, you're gonna see somebody pushing the sled. Like you check 10 posts, you're gonna see the sled 9 times. So basically, you have to move the body the way it's meant to move. A lot of primal movements because we get locked into these unnatural positions, seated positions a lot, and so I try to make sure that everybody knows how to balance on one leg to make sure that the body stabilizes in a lot of those different positions, and just move naturally, and then be able to accomplish the activities of daily living from multiple different ways. Whether you're doing strongman stuff in the lift, you're doing some HIIT stuff, it's going to be a whole ball of wax that's going to come together when we're training.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let's see, Dakota, you got anything for me? Anything that like piques your interest that you haven't tried yet?
I would love to get on that mace training. Those look really cool. And I think that style of training presents a lot of instability to the body. Swinging around that stick with a big weight on top forces your stabilizer muscles to work in a way that they're not used to working. And I'll say that I was like Matt in that if I didn't have a barbell, I thought I couldn't train up until here in the past year. COVID really spurred this, but I got a set of kettlebells and that has become my go-to method of training. They're so versatile. They really force me to focus on unilateral training. So that helps you correct imbalances. Similar to the maces, the setup of a kettlebell with that handle and the ball on top presents a lot of instability. So I've really noticed my overall movement quality has improved with more kettlebell training. So highly recommend kettlebells.
Awesome. Yeah, I've been getting into kettlebells a little bit more, specifically the last 2 years, I think, with COVID as well. But they're a lot of fun, a lot of stuff you can do with them.
Interesting. I just read in a study today that was posted that it has been shown 20 minutes of consecutive kettlebell training, you could burn up to 600 calories. And for some, that's equivalent to 6 miles. So anyone that says time is a barrier, I promise you, you can bust your ass in 20 minutes. And I literally used to be a person that had to train an hour and a half in the gym, easy. An hour and a half to 2 hours in the gym, 5 days a week. Now I'm in and out with the max is an hour. I try to get it lower than that. But honestly, yesterday I just didn't feel like being there. So a lot of times I'm like, I'm going to go really hard for a really short amount of time. I was in there for 30 minutes and it's the best workout I've probably had in 3 weeks. So pick up some bells. They'll be good for you.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So Matt, we talked about this a little earlier as well. With resistance training and kind of like how you're going about it, are you tracking anything? Are you like, how do you implement stuff? I think of specifically as we age, like, do you have a way, or do you, any one of the coaches want to add in here of tracking as we age, like our bone density, like our agility, how that changes as we age, any ways to tweak our training, kind of just to go along with just being adaptable and keeping it individualized?
Hey, this is Mark. So well, y'all know it's Mark, it's me on the camera. Right now I just bought this scale, like it's a Renpho, RENPHO. And so it gives you like 10 or 12 metrics. It gives you your bone density, body fat, lean body mass, muscle mass, skeletal mass, all that stuff, whatever. So I started doing that for myself. And then eventually, since Exo sent us these books here or whatever, I went back to old school, just writing down my workouts, because I realized that basically I wasn't focused on what I was doing. So to get back on track, I know that works. So I write down my sets, reps, exercise that I'm doing for the day, and getting back to the old school way of putting it down on paper. And then like for my running, I use a Strava app and sometimes a Nike app whenever that decides to work right, and just track what I'm doing from a running standpoint. Because one, it gives me a lot of data points, but it kind of lets me know, okay, am I BSing or am I actually pushing towards my goal? Because at the end of the day, just like we hold other people accountable, we have to hold ourselves accountable. So these numbers on paper and my apps are going to say, okay, yeah, you're hitting the mark, or okay, now you need to get up and get really going, because you know when you have a bad day of eating, you know what that feels like. You know what it's going to look like on the scale. It's like, okay, do I want to put that in the scale and keep that track, or do I want to know this is a bad day and move on and keep on pushing forward? And so it gives you all that stuff all in one. And then again, the old school way of putting it out on paper and pencil, just because it makes it more real, and it makes me say, okay, it's on paper, I can't skip it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, Mark hit the nail on the head. Data tracked is data monitored. And if you don't track it, you don't monitor it. And if you don't monitor it, then you don't know how it changes. So, I mean, simple, that's the simplest approach is, what Coach Morgan just said, with just writing things on paper, tracking it down, seeing how you progress. And, it's not going anywhere. That book's going to be there for years to come. He can check back in a year or 2 years, 3 years, see what he was doing. I mean, a more kind of granular approach would be, making sure you're getting some blood work done once a year. Maybe it's, they have these, I don't want to say, I mean, in short of a DEXA scan, which are really hard to come by. It's hard to get some really super reliable kind of gold standard body fat percentages. But what you could do is, if you do the same test every year, that's going to at least help. Like, as long as you're not floating back and forth from, handheld devices or skin fold, but something, really, I think, beneficial is to track your body fat percentage year to year. If it's really going to give you an insight into the amount of skeletal muscle tissue that you have. Because, like we'd said, like as you age, if we're constantly decreasing that skeletal muscle tissue, like we're going to notice some changes probably in our body each year. So, 2 easy ways, or really 3 easy ways: track on paper, your workouts, what you've been doing, at least to make sure you're constantly progressing in the gym. Like you said, staying accountable. You don't want to just go in, do the same things you've been doing year after year, week after week. Mm-hmm. If you're constantly hitting 50 pounds on your dumbbell bench press, and you've done that for the last 3 weeks of 3 sets of 10, you're probably not working too hard. You may need to bump it up and stress that system a little bit, and maybe struggle a little bit on those on that last set of those last 3 or 4 reps. So, the only way to do that is if you're constantly, kind of, like you said, writing it on paper, seeing what you do. But then the next thing is, okay, you want to get a little bit deeper into that. Make sure track your body fat throughout, 3 or 4 times a year. They have these little they're called in-body scans. There are a lot of nutrition stores. They're free to use. Gives you a pretty good look. It's as far as the data go, or the kind of research goes, they're fairly accurate. They got a few plus or minus percents in the body fat scale, but if you're constantly using that same implement, it'll get better with time. But you can at least see like skeletal muscle, water weight, and then fat distribution throughout the body. That's an easy, cost-efficient way to kind of track that, how your body's adapting from year to year, and then throughout the year as well. And then another way, I'm just checking the chat here, but what's a way to gauge if the weight's heavy enough? One of the simplest ways I could say is rating of perceived exertion. So they use that RPE scale, and that's and you can look those up. There's a couple different ones, but really the premise behind it is it'll give you kind of a feeling scale to each number, and you're going to want to make sure that you're kind of progressing that upward at week to week. You obviously don't want to fail every single week. So for instance, we kind of circle back to our dumbbell bench press example. If we're doing 3 sets of 10, week 1, we get all 3 sets of 10. The RP scale, we look at it, it says, this was moderately difficult at a 6 or a 7. Well, that next week, we're going to say, well, I need to go up a little bit because I didn't feel moderately difficult. It just felt like it was okay. Like I feel like I could have got, 12 to 15 reps, then we're probably too low in weight. You may want to leave 1 to 2 reps in the tank through that exercise, but every week you're going to keep progressing up. And then, if for whatever reason, on week 4, week 5, you're still pushing, you only get 9 reps on that last set, that's okay. It's okay because you're now pushing yourself, you're stressing the system, and that's what we want to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm glad you touched on that, and that was brought up in the chat. I think that's probably where a lot of people get stuck, is just with knowing how much they're supposed to be doing, like how many reps, how much weight, when they change it, how many weeks are they supposed to do that. And so just knowing how to be progressing on their own if they're doing it on their own, and then if they're not, if they're open to other suggestions, looking for a coach or looking for advice from someone is going to be a huge game changer to make sure that they're doing it the right way. But still, people can still have success doing it on their own, just going by rate of perceived exertion, like you were saying. So yeah, that's a huge point.
Sorry, Beth. I think all the time when we throw out so many science words, it can be overwhelming to people. It's and when they think about it, it's all what rate of perceived exertion means is how hard was that for you? So if you're at the end of the day, and like Matt said, if you're at a bench press and it's calling for 3 sets of 10 and you're on your second set and you could have busted out 18 reps, you're by no means close enough to creating enough stress on the body for your body to adapt. So I feel like that really is people's biggest problem, is a lot of people on this call are probably already strength training. They just don't know how hard and what intensity you need to be training at to see results. Mm-hmm. Especially in the female population, I work with sometimes just a group of all females, and they literally all bring their 10-pound dumbbells to class and they use them for every single movement. So they're doing a lateral raise with 10s, which is probably more of a max load for them. And then they're doing a chest press with 10s. When in all honesty, if they put their force into it, some of them should be lifting 30s on a dumbbell bench, maybe even 40s. And a lot of times, I don't think individuals understand that you should feel some substance in the weight. I tell that to a lot of my people that I work just directly one-on-one with. It shouldn't feel like you can throw this through the roof. It's actually going to feel better when you have some substance to the weight and there's actually some weight on it where you are controlling the movement. The weight is not controlling you.
Mhm.
And I think that's where you can start is, okay, if I have 3 sets of 10 and 10 is like, I hit 10 the first set and then I go to my second set and I'm like, I could have hit 15, then you need to bump that weight up on that very next set. Don't wait till the next day. Like, go grab the 15s and then you bust out 12 and it's still 10. 2 left in the tank is different than 5. And I think that's where you can really start to see big improvements because you're starting to stress the body enough to force it to have adaptation. And that's ultimately what you're looking for.
Yeah, for sure. All right, guys. Well, we're running up on time. Any other thoughts from some of the coaches? Thoughts on strength training? Thoughts on what you guys do?
I'll be real quick here, but I think it's also important to note that resistance training increases neural connections between the nervous system and the muscles, and that increases overall movement quality, helps with coordination and balance, and helps with reduction in injury.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. All righty. Well, there's nothing else. Thanks for joining today for our episode. We're going to meet again in 2 weeks. So we're talking about navigating holiday nutrition and how to approach the holidays. So that will be a hot topic with people trying to figure out how they're supposed to eat over that crazy, month and a half, 2 months of lots of parties and holiday food. So thanks for hopping on, guys. We had a great discussion and we'll see you again in 2 weeks. Okay.